FitzNews.com reports Charleston County Council officials met with the new SIB chairman earlier this week to discuss 526. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with Dana Beach of the Coastal Conservation League.
Dana, it is so good to see you again.
Thank you, Quintin. It's always great to see you.
Likewise. Well, let me talk to you about the obvious, because I was actually doing my research for the Thomas Ravenel interview on Monday when I interviewed him. And then on my way there, I saw this particular article in FitzNewsPaper.com. It says this: Charleston leaders hold secret meeting on Interstate 526. Where does your mind go to?
I still don't know anything about it, and I understand that some of the council members met with the Infrastructure Bank chairman, and whom I have not met yet. I have asked our governor if he would introduce me to Mr. White, and he said he would do it, but he hasn't done it yet, which is frankly par for the course for everything I've asked him to do so far. But that's another subject.
Okay.
It just is so, I think, disturbing to realize that nothing much has changed. We are moving forward in this sort of automatic, kind of reflexive direction toward something that we should all realize is not going to be viable in the long run. I mean, we don't have any more money for the project. The money is not going to be made available through the new funding source in the state. The state funding was very clearly delineated to go toward maintenance and repair, which it should, and we've all worked on that and focused on that, and Senator Davis especially, but also Larry Grooms and others. So we're in the same position we were in, except that the cost has probably gone even higher for 526. We have $400 million roughly. The project will be considerably over $700 million. The mayor and others continue the fiction that this will somehow solve all of our problems. And the reality is that we can do things right away that will move people through these bottlenecks faster and will get people access to non-automobile modes of transportation, including bus rapid transit and better buses, better car, biking and pedestrian facilities. All of those things are suffering as a result of this single-minded obsession with an 8-mile-long interstate to Johns Island.
That has me thinking. Is there a part of you that says this 526 proposal is kind of like the gas tax increase, where they basically stuffed college tuition inside of that?
Yeah, yes, I think it's a diversion. It is a sleight of hand. It's really politics at its worst. I give you one example. The thing that came to my mind when I was reading the paper a week or two ago is the $2 million roughly shortfall for the intermodal center.
Right.
We now have a train station that we should all be mortally embarrassed by. It is. We've taken it to Jacksonville, Richmond, and most people have taken it at one time or another. You don't take it if you don't have to, though, because it is. The train is usually late, but the train station is just about as depressing as a prison. I mean, it even looks a little bit like that. And so we are now planning to build something new. And instead of doing something grand that we can celebrate another mode of transportation and the people who really frankly have to take that mode, which are people who have less money than the average citizen, we're going to spend a piddling $10 million, can't even come up with an extra $2 million on a building that will be probably worse than the one that's already there. Meanwhile, and this is what I was fascinated by, I saw in the paper, Chicago is renovating their Union Station to the tune of $1 billion. And it's a renovation in an area that's not very good. It's sort of like our train station. But they're using it to revitalize that area.
Right.
They're bringing in private funding. It's a public-private partnership. It's creative. It's going to have housing. It'll have commercial office space. It'll be a magnet for redevelopment and it will enhance the community, and it will provide a beautiful facility for people to take Amtrak out of Chicago, or to take the Metro within the region, or to take the Metro in the region.
Right.
We could do the same thing, and the leadership, instead of focusing on those opportunities, is focusing on this interstate that can never be built. And so, I say we need new leadership.
I was going to ask you more about that because according to FenceNews.com, the article reads this: according to our sources, Rawl organized a private meeting without notifying the rest of his fellow council members. Our interests say they too were kept in the dark about the discussion. So now that this has been a private discussion, what should the discussion be about next?
Well, again, I think we need to take a breather, step back and say, folks, here's the reality. We have this amount of money. We've got the half-cent sales tax coming in. It was not designated for 526. Very clearly omitted from that list. Even though they made it squirrely enough that, they could perhaps legally try to use it for that. But they very, very clearly did not include it, intentionally didn't include it. So that's not available. We have, in some ways you could look at this and say the most unbelievable opportunity laid before us with $600 million for transit, with some additional funding to make the kinds of improvements that need to be made. We already have Maybank and River Road funded. That project was funded years ago and is barely inching along, but it is inching along. We've got opportunities. By the way, that project could be better. They could put a roundabout at the intersection. It would work much better than a traffic light.
Okay.
And it's not very hard to do that. And I guess here's the thing that strikes me about it is none of these, it's not like dealing with climate change. This is not rocket science. Improving the intersection at Main and 17, building Main Road up and perhaps adding 2 more lanes, adding some lanes, improving the bike and pedestrian access elsewhere on Johns Island and on James Island. Those are things that are very easy to do if we have the focus to do it. So I think, if it were me in one of those positions, I would say I would convene a civic meeting, and I would say, let's be honest about where we are and where we want to go, and let's get ideas. Let's get ideas on where do you all think we should go? I was looking at, I don't look at Facebook very often, but I was looking at my friend Thomas LaGree's Facebook, and he had like 80 comments about the backup on Maybank at River Road.
Right.
And people were saying, why don't they fix the light, or why don't they put a roundabout in? And I was thinking today, I went out 17, and I was thinking, people who sit in this traffic every day have thought a lot about it, and they have usually pretty good instincts about how to deal with it in a detailed way. Is the light cycle too long? Should there be a crosswalk? I mean, for example, I actually posted on Facebook that as you're going to Farm Field,
Right.
there's a red light for your left turn, even though there's no oncoming traffic. Why is that?
Right.
I mean, these are things that are blindingly easy to fix. But if we are blinded by the specter, the prospect, the fiction of this interstate that somehow solves all of our problems, we don't have to deal with any of those, then we'll never solve any problems.
And you also said this to Fifth News, and this is quote, "This comes as a complete surprise. This continues the pattern of secrecy and lack of public input on an expenditure of billions of taxpayers' dollars and the future of this metropolitan region." You also said this too, and I thought this was very telling too. You said this quote, "It is unacceptably inexpensive, the most expensive transportation project in the history of South Carolina. It cannot be paid for under any funding scenario. If it were funded, it would drain resources from the rest of the region and across the state that badly needs repair and upgrade our existing system. So what are the issues that we need to tackle right now in South Carolina as far as roads?
Well, here's on the good side, and I sound like I'm being very critical, and I guess maybe at some level I am, but the planning sessions that have been going on West Ashley are excellent. They've come up with the kind of fine-grained solutions to the congestion problems and the quality of the place problems to enhance that place, to use Citadel Mall in a much more efficient way. I mean, it's really an exciting prospect, but it's got to be funded. It has to be funded, and I have said in my folks' emails, I hope you get those.
Oh, yes.
That the real question is, now we do the planning, but do we have the wherewithal to make the commitment to implement those plans? And in the past, we have not. The city of Charleston signed something called Complete Streets that many cities signed all over America. This was during the last administration. And that was whenever a street was repaved or a project instituted, there would be a complete suite of options for people to walk and bike and drive. We didn't do any of it. Maybank Highway was completely redone. It even has some little flower planted median at the intersection of Folly Road. But there are no bike lanes included. None. I mean, it's so... I'm complaining again, but I guess what I'm saying is we don't need to do much more planning. We just need to get the money flowing to the things that we know need to be done, and we know what they are. I mean, I could go down the list. I won't bore you with the list, but everyone who's probably watching this video and lives in this region knows what they are, and we can prioritize them and do them systematically one after another. We have the money, we have the plans. All we need to do is deploy the money and get the work going.
You also said this too, quote, ultimately, our elected leaders will be held responsible for the failure to deal with some of the most important challenges that face the region. So who are those elected officials in your mind?
Well, I think obviously our county and city council members are the most important ones because they're the ones who make the decisions about which projects go forward. They have not only statutory authority to approve projects and spend money, and that's the key. They also have the bully pulpit, so they can stand up and say, here's how I think we should go forward. That's why we elect them, for that, to express that leadership. And leadership is really an art, a blend of listening to your constituents, understanding what they want and what they need, but also making decisions based on what you know, and it's not always going to be the decision that the neighborhood president wants you to make. In some cases, that might not be the best thing for the larger region. But frankly, I have to use the apartment moratorium as a good example. That's another decision that the city council made, and it's related to transportation. It was unfortunate because it will again divert our attention for 6 months away from actually doing the things that need to be done. They said we're going to, and actually to Mike Seeking's credit, he said, look, we need to, one, look at what the other governments are doing, and two, and he and Dudley Gregory and a few others said we need to make sure that the infrastructure investments are made. So that at the end of 6 months, something different has happened. The point of a moratorium is that it gives you the time to do something. It's not, the point is not just to hold things up for 6 months and then be in the same position you're in 6 months later. So I guess the leadership, I see a little bit of it. I don't see enough of it, but I think, like I say, with Mike and with Dudley Gregory and even to an extent with some of the council members, I think Vic Rawl is doing an incredible job of running the council. I think, though, that now's the time to call the question. There are facts out there we need to face. I hate to say they're inconvenient facts, but they're inconvenient but convenient in the sense that this course of action isn't going to work, but we know one that's better, that will, and we can pay for it. The beauty of the the growth in this region.
Right.
And that's a challenge in many ways, but the beauty of it is we have a lot of money. You know, we have more money than we've ever had in the region, ever, in the history of Charleston. We've got taxes pouring in, and $2 billion coming in just specifically through the half-cent sales tax over the next 20 years. So we have the resources, we have the plans, we need to get the projects going.
And if you were to talk with John White one-on-one, what would that one question be to him?
I would say, how do you plan to prioritize the needs of the state? How do you plan to evaluate all of the different requests and pending projects that the SIB has been presented, knowing that you can only fund a tiny fraction of them?
Okay.
How do you plan to analyze and make those judgments? And how do you, and also, I guess I'd say, I would have said it before he was appointed, and you know, everything I've heard about him, I've heard good things about him, but I would say, do you have the inclination and the courage, frankly, to stand up to the political special interests who have been running the state and twerking the funding program for now the last century? Do you have the courage to say, as Vince Graham said when he was head of the SIB, we're going to put together an objective set of criteria on that will tell us how to better spend this money? And John White could continue that. You know, the good news is that the SIB started that with under Vince Graham's leadership, and they could continue it. But I think the one thing that I've heard is that the governor who replaced Vince Graham with John White, apparently at the request of Senator Sandy Sin and Leon Stavronakis and others, did it because clearly they wanted a different outcome from the SIB than they were getting with this prioritization process with Vince. So with John, maybe they assume they're going to get a different outcome. I hope they're wrong. I hope we're going to get the same kind of objective, analytical review of projects that we were getting under Vince Graham's leadership.
Dana Beach, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Well, thank you, Quintin. These are very important issues. It could not be a more important time to talk about.
I agree. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.